Right, good afternoon, Neil Brooks, Headmaster at Cranleigh Prep. Lovely to see you, Neil. Thanks for joining me today.
Hello, yeah, it's a real pleasure. It's nice to be with you.
Absolutely. Neil, just kicking off with a little history. You had a very successful career in the army, and then your educational career started at Cot Hill, I believe, where you were first housemaster and then went on to be the head. So I think you were there for about 10 years. You then went and set up the Cot Hill Trust, which is a group of, I believe, 8 prep schools. And then went on to spend some time in London working with inner city children before joining Cranleigh as head in 2018. I hope I've got that right. I wondered who or what led you down the educational path, having had a successful and active career in the army.
Yes, I'm going to correct you a little bit in that I didn't set up the Cot Hill Trust.
Right.
I took it on as the interim principal for a short while before I went into London.
Okay.
So
you're very honourable not to take credit.
I absolutely can't take credit for that. So what led me from the army into education? Well, I'd spent several years being institutionalized, and a very dear friend of mine had been in the Marines, and he ended up as a teacher, and so it really was on his recommendation. And now, having done it for 20 odd years, I think that there are a few other careers which give one the privilege actually of dealing with the future, individuals' futures and the future of society. I mean, it is wonderful to be able to play, albeit a very small part in that with people. So that's really what led me to it, was jumping from one institution to another.
And how do you think education's shape has changed over the past few years? And I guess so a two-part question. How do you educate the whole child when there are such sort of structures and stringents involved in getting them onto their senior school?
Yes, well, we do operate in one of the most examined and tracked systems in Europe, and I can't pretend to be a fan of it at all. I don't really like the fact that we judge a child's value to humanity by 3 scores that they may gain at IICB pre-assessment or on CAT scores or something like that. I don't like it at all. And I prefer that we look at developing, alongside a child's academic abilities, their character and their personality as well. And so one has to run a program, therefore, in a school which promotes and expands and rejoices in what children have to offer beyond the traditional scope of classrooms. I mean, the exams are important, but they're by no means all important. And actually, how children can work with one another and what they have to offer is as important.
And the assessment process gets earlier and earlier, doesn't it? So it does put a huge pressure on the prep school to be working within those remits at such an early stage of a child's education.
Yeah, it does. And the worry for me is not simply about what that brings to prep schools and how we have to operate within those confines, but also the restrictions that it puts on childhood. And we find that children now are having their childhoods curtailed because of these pressures and anxieties, which, you know, let's face it, when I was a child, simply didn't worry about at all. No. I was more worried about getting caught for doing something which, you know, just like misdemeanor or something. Yes, and how I was going to explain my way out of it.
And do you, on that basis, I guess, are you looking for a particular type of child at Cranleigh Prep? And is there a particular child that flourishes with you?
I'm pleased to say there isn't, and I'm going to qualify that by saying they have to be a mainstream school child, in that we do have some support available, but you know, we have to be responsible in knowing that a child is going to survive and thrive in a mainstream classroom. But beyond that, what we want to do is really educate the child insofar as we can in what is a reflection of wider society where they're going to operate as adults. And therefore, we want children with a whole spread of different talents and skill sets so that they can understand that when they do step off into, well, both senior schools and then beyond as adults, that not everybody is an A grade student. Not everybody is brilliant at music or in the first team for sport, but that everybody in somehow has some strength and something to offer the team. And I think if children who go through the independent sector can understand that, I mean, there is a reality that there's an aspiration and an expectation that children who are lucky enough to access the independent sector are going to go on to managerial positions, to positions of authority and influence. And to do that properly, to be able to lead properly, they have to be able to understand their teams, their community, and the skills and talents, and have empathy with those who make up that community. So we spend a lot of time trying to get children to develop that thoughtfulness of others and the empathy for others.
And I guess with being a family school and operating with lots of siblings, by default you are accepting in children of varying different levels of talent and expertise. So actually, it's a really exciting journey, because you're not selecting the cream of the cream necessarily. You are actually embracing families with all sorts of different abilities.
Yes, that's right. And our sibling policy is incredibly strong. We want, if it is sensible for us to do so, that takes me back to my point about the learning support which we can offer. If it is such that a child is going to be okay in mainstream schooling, we want families to have a shared experience of schooling, because I know from my own experience listening to my own sons who are now through school and university, thankfully they're off the payroll, but listening to them tell stories to one another about their times at school, and they have that connection. It's really important, and it's lovely to keep that that family link for them. So yeah, we have a really strong sibling policy, and that does bring different talent and a spread of abilities.
And beyond the family core, what would you say your school ethos is? If you had to drill down on what separates Cranleigh from others, what might it be?
Well, we have aims of preparing children for those positions of leadership eventually when they become adults, and indeed we hope to a degree when they go on to their public schools. And there is a code of conduct around the school, which I'm sure the children are fed up with me banging on about it, but I think if they can leave here with at least the seeds of understanding for that sown, then we've done a pretty good job and set them on what might be a successful path for them. But we want them to develop a sense of responsibility, and that responsibility is for themselves, for others, and for their environment, for their decisions as well. Whether those decisions are good or bad, they can celebrate the good decisions, and they can take responsibility for those which are poor. And I think that is increasingly lacking in society. But it leads through to honesty and integrity. So responsibility we want them to have. We want them to have a sense of service. We want them to be successful in themselves, but we want them really to be successful for others and to really have something to add to wider society, and a sense that that is important, that it is not all about grabbing things for yourself, but it is actually, there's much more joy to be had in promoting others and lifting others up to do well and leading them on than there is in surrounding oneself in trinkets of success, which are fleeting. We develop a sense of perseverance as well. to work hard and try hard and be resilient and keep on going. And that's not just being resilient in picking themselves up from failure and when things go wrong, but it's also being resilient in having a steadfast understanding of who they are as a person, and then being able to accept the views of others, the decisions of others, the behaviors of others, by maintaining the center ground, and not by ignoring and arguing, but being accepting of it. So that then links to our final two aims, which are thoughtfulness and empathy. And there's a thread which links all of these anyway. But if we can have a child who leaves here with the seeds of understanding of responsibility, service, perseverance, thoughtfulness, and empathy, then I think we're some way on putting them on track to being successful through their teenage years and in adulthood.
And I guess underlining those is a real sense of authenticity. I mean, everything you've discussed so far is actually about sort of learning who you are and how you fit into the community around you. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the only time when we can really be confident and comfortable, isn't it? And I know we all suffer those anxieties and worries of, oh my goodness, what will people think? that's being human. But in recognizing that that is human is part of that journey. I think if we can accept that humans are imperfect, but that imperfection in itself is wonderful and something to be embraced, then we are going to produce children who are not fearful of having a go, have a sense of adventure, and are able to explore and understand and be really open and honest with others as well as with themselves. It's hugely important, I think, and arguably more so than their academic performance. That of course has got huge value, but really if they can understand themselves, they're going to be comfortable humans.
And that leads perfectly on to chatting a little bit more about boarding at Cranleigh. I'm really interested to know, I mean, I've heard you speak before about what perhaps you and I remember the boarding environment being compared to modern day boarding. It is a very different beast, isn't it?
It's completely different. I think the days of, you know, sending your child away and seeing them an inch taller and trying to pick them out of a line, so I think that one's out. They've quite rightly gone. And not least of all because we realize the value and importance of family and of parenting and of influence of parents as well. And so boarding now tends not to be so full on with regards to timeline, and here what we do is weekly boarding or flexi boarding. And I think at a young age that allows a child the opportunity to begin to make their own decisions, to begin to take responsibility for their actions, to begin to develop that sense of independence, all done within an environment which is safe and monitored and able to scoop them up when they do fall, but at least they feel that, yeah, they're doing this themselves. And I know that there are extraordinary pressures on parents nowadays to chase those numbers. And I think if you have a child at home, it's too much of a temptation to say, well, come on, let me just scribble away with this prep. Otherwise your mark's not going to be great. And it's wrong to do that. It's absolutely wrong to do that. Whereas if the child is boarding, those influences are not there, and the child begins to develop resilience, a proper understanding actually of where they're going wrong academically or where they're going right academically. And so I'm a huge fan of the boarding. It's also great fun. It's great fun. It allows them to develop truly their individual character without their parents molding and constantly watching and making those judgments. And if children make mistakes at school that, you know, sometimes we don't actually, it's just a childish mistake. The parents need not know about that because it's a private individual thing to that child. And I think that's a huge benefit of boarding. And then as they get older, they become more comfortable and secure in that environment, and they can go on. You know, the job of a parent essentially is not to disappear completely, but it is to teach one's child how to live without you. I mean, that's really what it is. And I know that's so difficult for so many parents now, but if you do it properly, your child will always know that you love them and support them, but they will feel the freedom to go and live their lives how and where they want to. I talked to my wife, our children are now grown up, and there's every chance one of them's just gone off to live in the Pyrenees. And, you know, she is, oh my goodness, he's gone and he's got, yeah, but it's his life, and he knows we love him, and he's gone off to do what he wants to do without feeling shackled to us, you know, the aging old doobies who sit in front of the fire and chat in the evening.
We think we're cutting edge, but apparently we're not.
No, of course we're not. No, I still see myself in my late 20s.
Exactly.
Until I go for a run and everything creaks.
I think also, I mean, for the staff, it's a real insight to a child's character. And I think quite often, you know, I imagine it must be really tough if you don't know what's going on at home necessarily. You know, something like the hamster dying, or, you know, something going not quite right at home might have a huge influence on the child's day at school, which you might, you know, it's good to put the bits of the jigsaw puzzle together.
It's massively important that, you know, the school does not do this in isolation, that the school and parents work in partnership to develop the child and to allow the child to grow. And that communication is increasingly important, that we understand what factors at home are influencing a child's behavior, such that we can then adapt how we approach the child accordingly and make them feel comfortable. So there is a very open and what has to be honest dialogue between school and home. There is that anyway in the day school element of it, but it's far more important, I think, in the boarding school element, where we are having to perhaps dab a few tears because the hamster has passed or something. But yeah, I think we are much better nowadays in schools generally at keeping that line of communication with parents going and knowing that it's very much a partnership.
And on that note, how many go on from Cranleigh Prep to Cranleigh Senior, and that open dialogue with parents and that entry into senior school and the discussion that you're in really for, as we said earlier, from about the last 2 to 3 years of prep school, that's a really important line of communication to make sure that you place that child in the right ongoing school, isn't it?
It absolutely is. So all of those wretched 11 plus assessments are going to take place in year 6. In the preceding year, in year 5, the parents are invited in and we talk to them about making that very honest appraisal about their child and what is going to fit them. So not one's own aspirations and desires, but really, who is my child and where are they going to thrive? And it's tricky because, of course, they are a young child and therefore by nature they're going to develop and change, and we're trying to predict the future, and goodness knows how difficult that is. But also schools will change in time. But we have that conversation and we talk to them about various factors and influences on those decisions. And then many will go across to Cranleigh School as their public school, because we have a shared ethos and philosophy, and therefore one could argue that if a child is thriving here, then that the likelihood is it's going to continue when they go over to Cranleigh School. But there are children for whom it is not right, and therefore we do look for other options as well, and therefore we have a feed to Charterhouse and Wellington and Ardingly, and I can't think when the last time we sent someone to Marlborough, but certainly further afield. But all of those schools to which we feed tend to have that at least legacy of being country boarding public schools who are also interested in that holistic education and not solely focused on academia. One or two will trickle into RGS Guildford and Guildford High maybe, but really most of them will go on to those more rounded public schools, which either still are boarding or have that legacy of boarding.
And predominantly co-ed?
Predominantly co-ed. Predominantly co-ed. Yeah. The world's co-ed.
Yeah,
He says, having been the headmaster of an all-boys school.
Well, I know I was going to ask you that actually. I mean, is it culturally very different, or is it actually less than people debate?
I think it's less than people debate, actually. I think it's, and this is a huge generalization because it is very much horses for courses, but I think, you know, the world is co-educational, and therefore it goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning about wanting to educate children in a breadth of talents and skill sets to develop empathy and understanding. Well, surely at its most basic level, that happens between the sexes, that you want the two to begin to live together, to work together, to collaborate, so that they have that understanding that there are absolutely differences between the two sexes. Both have strengths, both have weaknesses, both have something to offer. Hugely important. And I think of our two children, and when they went to an all-boys prep school, and they had some pretty firm male influences as young children. And I think my wife and I, my wife more because she's more switched on to this sort of thing, was thinking, not sure that this is going quite in the right direction. And they were due to go off to an all-boys senior school, but we sent them co-ed. And I have to say, it's one of the best decisions that she ever forced me to make.
Credits due. Neil, thank you so much. On a final, more of a personal note, as a headmaster of a busy prep school, when and if you do get an opportunity to switch off, what do you like doing in your own time?
Oh my goodness, I like to go home. For us is down on the Dorset coast.
Wow.
And luckily enough, we snuck away this weekend. So we went down Sunday morning, we woke up, went for a little run around the bay and for a swim in the sea. Glorious.
Fantastic. Fantastic, Neil. Well, thank you for your time today. It sounds like a very special school, and look forward to coming to visit you soon.
That would be lovely. Thank you so
Wonderful.
much. Lovely to see you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.